everyone to Giants' latest. And the latest is that it's Friday and we still don't have a quarterback. Our only quarterback on the roster is Tommy Cutlets DeVito. So I know as Giants fans, I think most of us feel good about the signings, but are still like, who is throwing the ball, which is very fair. So the story is is Aaron Rodgers is out on a beach somewhere contemplating his life's decisions, not deciding, I guess, whether or not he wants to be a Steeler, Giant, or a Viking, I guess. And then in the meantime, the Giants brought in Joe Flacco yesterday, and today they had a meeting with Russell Wilson. Now, I don't know what time the meeting with Russell Wilson is. I do know that yesterday cameras caught him leaving Cleveland in the early afternoon. So it's possible that he landed in New York last night. The meeting is early. It's going on all day. We might have an answer this afternoon. I am anxiously staring my phone and waiting for that breaking news. I have NFL Network on in the background. But I'm getting the feeling that I just am not so sure that we're definitely going to have an answer today. I don't know why. I think if the Giants are smart at this point, they have told Aaron Rodgers to piss off and said, if you can't make a decision by this time, which if I were them, I would have given the timeline of Wednesday at 5 p.m., said, figure it out, buddy, or else you're out of the question for us. I don't know if they did that. It's seeming like they didn't. If I were them, I would have. So I think at this point, they're moving forward under the assumption that Aaron Rodgers is not accepting their offer to be a Giant, which is what they should be doing. But I also think that they should have just given him a deadline and be like, listen, bro, figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, we're moving on without you. So it sounds like Joe Flacco and Russ Wilson are the top two options. I think that they definitely prefer Russ Wilson. We know that they had a good meeting with him last time and so on. But let's talk about Joe Flacco for a minute, because I did think it was interesting that all of a sudden out of nowhere, Joe Flacco was brought into the building yesterday. There were no reports that they were thinking of talking to him. There were no reports that he was, going to be one of their backup options if it didn't work for Russ or Aaron Rodgers. There was nothing that led me or the fandom to believe that Joe Flacco was going to be an option until there were reports yesterday saying, oh, by the way, Joe Flacco went to meet with the Giants today. So I think it's smart that they're covering all bases. I'm curious to see if Jameis Winston is also brought into the building at some point. Maybe that's going to be a meeting later this afternoon and they'll have an answer this weekend. I really don't know. But I do think that if they're doing the due diligence and they're having Joe Flacco in and, they've gone after Rodgers and Stafford and Russ Wilson, I'm at the feeling where I think that Wilson is their number one choice. And I do think that they are not really going to let him leave the building today without some sort of answer. I don't know. I really don't know. What I think is interesting is that what we've seen from Joe Schoen on Hard Knocks is that he is this super tough, hardcore negotiator. And then I see things like Aaron Rodgers dilly-dallying and, who knows when we're going to have an answer about Russ Wilson, that I'm just like, I really don't know what to believe. And maybe after everything that happened with Hard Knocks, and there was so much pushback and negative feedback from NFL fans as a whole that he sucks as a GM, especially with the whole negotiating process. I don't know, maybe he took a step back and learned something. We may never know. But I do think that if they feel like Russ Wilson is a good option, they need to offer him something today. And look, I think it's fair to say to Russ, like, we get it. You just came from Cleveland, like, talk it over with your wife and your family and whatever. But, like, please give us an answer, ASAP. But I still would give him a deadline. So I'm assuming that's how things are going. I think ultimately that it is going to be Russ Wilson who is the quarterback. I think if you look at the Browns and the Giants, if you're Russ Wilson, like, there's no question, you're picking the Giants for a multitude of reasons. But I think one of the biggest reasons is for years, there have been conversations and talk around the fact that his wife, Sierra, wants to be in New York, wants to have that opportunity, and so on. So I think he's going to pick New York, but until it's official, in writing, blaring across my TV screen, I will not necessarily believe it. But as we wait for the quarterback to figure itself out at some point this year, at least we know that the Giants are taking the offensive line seriously. And over the course of free agency, they have signed 4 veteran offensive linemen. Now, 2 of them are new and 2 of them are old former Giants, but I I think what's most important is the fact that they are bringing in veteran free agents, where in the past, since Joe Shane has been here, he has focused a lot on the draft, and it has bit him in the ass time after time. So I'm glad that they're bringing in veterans. I think it's really important. I think that should absolutely not prevent them from drafting a guard and or a tackle in April. That needs to be a priority as well, because you could never have too many offensive linemen. But I do like that, at least from a continuity perspective, from left to right, we are going to have the exact same offensive line this year as we did last year. So it's going to be Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, Greg Van Roten, and then Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. So that's our line, which I like. For the first time in so long, we're finally going to have the same offensive line. And then they've got backup options. So they've re-signed Aaron Stinney. They also brought in James Hudson III. They have Evan Neal, Josh Azudu, and then they brought in Stone Forsythe. So they have options at backups and swing tackle, which is the most important. Everything needs to be a competition, especially when it comes to the offensive line. I do want to see those 5 guys that I already talked about. I want to see them start, because I know that before Andrew Thomas went down, when that was the offensive line, it was serviceable and it was pretty good. Not the best, not the worst in the league, but even Jermaine Illuminor came out and said, look, we can sit down, we can watch film, but our offensive line was holding up pretty well against some really good defensive lines. Now, what he didn't say was that the quarterback was the one holding them back, but I think as a Giants fan, you have to feel like, all right, we finally have some continuity. We're our second year with Carmen Brasillo, who did a nice job last year. We're going to have some depth. They're finally moving Azudu and Neal to guard, which is what they should have done 2 years ago at this point. But they're finally doing that. And then hopefully, they're going to go after a guard and or a tackle in the draft, and they are not going to be the only team in the NFL like they were last year who didn't draft offensive line or defensive line. So I am hopeful that Joe Shane is finally learning from his mistakes, as evidenced by some of these things that we talk about, and the offensive line being one of them. So I just like the fact that we finally have some depth there. And what I think some of these signings and some of these meetings that we're hearing about are kind of proving to people is that the Giants are a desirable place. Now, I don't mean that in the sense that if you come to the Giants, you think you're going to win a Super Bowl. I know ultimately that's what players want, but money comes first. So don't try to convince me, oh, it's all about winning. Why don't you ask Myles Garrett about that? Why don't, there's many players that you could say, oh, they're in it to win it, but then they take the higher offer. So I talk about that a lot when I talk about Slayton, because I kind of felt like for his like mental sanity, like maybe he should go to a team that is going to win. But the thing that I thought was really interesting was Slayton, Adebo, and Holland were all asked during their introductory pressers, what excited you about New York? Why did you want to come here? You know, the Giants beat writers, like they are in it to win it. You're not getting softballs thrown at you. So I appreciate that they're all like that, you know, and all of them gave kind of different variations of the same answer. And it was the fact that they like the coaching, you know, from the cornerback and the safety perspective. They really liked the young defense. I heard both of those players, Adebo and Holland, mention the fact that the secondary is really young. And then they've got guys like Burns and Okereke and Dexter Lawrence and Thibodeau, who are veterans in the league at this point, who have been through adversity, who know what it's like to have to be able to come out of that and try and win, you know, and I'm really curious to see what Shane Bowen is going to do about it. But, you know, Slayton also said that he believes in the vision of the team and he likes what they told him about their plan at quarterback. Now, I think their plan at quarterback is to trade up for Cam Ward at this point, but I do think that if you're Slayton, you have to feel like, all right, if they bring in Russ Wilson and Cam Ward or Sanders, I feel like as a wide receiver, A, I'm going to get the targets, and B, I'm going to get the targets from a good football player, someone who's hopefully going to be more accurate than Daniel Jones was. So, you know, I get it. I think as a fan, it makes me feel a little bit excited. I think it helps quell that narrative of no one wants to come to the Giants because they're the worst team and Mara sucks and Joe Shane's the worst and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure there's a little bit of truth to that, but I also think that they see some potential with this team. They think that at the very least, you know, these guys signed 3-year deals. So if 2025 is a total bust, they have to feel like, okay, well, I have a new GM and I'm going to be able to start all over. So if I have maybe a rocky year learning this new defense or whatever it is in 2025, that I can redeem myself in 2026. And that's probably not really the right approach, but it could be something that's just like in the back of their brains as they think about, why they wanted to go to the Giants versus other teams. And Holland did a really awesome interview that I loved, and he just spoke so highly of the Giants. And as a fan, it made me feel happy that there are players out there who want to come here and are excited to play for the Giants. So I was really happy about that. I'm excited to see these guys all get to work. And, before we know it, it's going to be OTAs and we're going to be able to see them all on the field. So that's exciting. And, you have to stay tuned, guys. Make sure you subscribe because we don't have a quarterback, but it's coming soon and it will be on Giants Latest.